Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sydney. I film cruelty-free beauty videos, and today's video is going to be my eyeshadow palette collection. I don't think I've ever done an eyeshadow palette collection video on YouTube. I have quite the eyeshadow palette collection. I feel like over the past maybe 4 months, I would say, I've finally kind of broken myself of the eyeshadow obsessive buying habit. But that is a habit that I've had for quite a long time. So I've got quite the palette collection, and this is going to be a long video, so I'm not going to blabber on any farther. Let's hop into it, you guys. I'm going to fly through these because we've got a lot. I do also want to throw in a quick little disclaimer before we hop into the palettes that I no longer purchase from some of these brands based on behaviors that they've exhibited since I purchased these palettes. So I know I've spoken about a couple of these brands, whether on Instagram or on my channel, that I no longer support them, but these palettes are my collection. I'm not just going to throw them out because I did purchase them or receive them as gifts, and I feel like it's wasteful to do so. So now let's hop into it. So the first palette I wanted to show you guys is the Nude Light palette from Huda Beauty. This one I scored on an incredible deal. I'm a sale shopper. I bought 90% of these on sale. And I've just been drooling over this palette for so long. I tried to dupe it and I was unsatisfied with my dupe, and now I have this palette and I really like it. It doesn't get as much love as it should. It's going to be a common theme with a lot of these palettes, but I'm on a mission this year to really dig into my palettes, really love on them. It's February and I haven't bought an eyeshadow palette yet. I'm pretty sure that's a new record for me, so fingers crossed things are off to a good start. But this is a really great, like, easy everyday palette. Next up, we have the Nomad Cosmetics Studio 54 palette. This palette is a bit of a regret for me. I featured it in several regret videos. I just feel like these shadows are not quite as sparkly and as easy to work with as I was hoping they would be. I thought this was going to be a very similar formula to what's in the Tokyo palette from Nomad Cosmetics, but it's a little bit thicker and I feel like it's harder to use. It just doesn't give the same effect, and that's why I would have to say that this one's a regret. Next up, we have the Dose of Colors Vacation palette. You guys, I've really been into using this one over the past couple months. I adore the glittery shadows in here. For the longest time, I wouldn't use it because I was like, well, if I use it up, it's gone. I don't think you can even buy this palette anymore, but that's beyond ridiculous. That's a mindset that I'm working really hard to change this year, and I really love the staple neutrals in this palette, and the shimmery shades are just so much fun to play with. They make my heart so happy. Next up, we have the At Foresight collection that ColourPop created with Robbie Christie. I adore this palette. I think this is the newest palette that I've added to my collection. Yeah, I think so. I bought this in November, I believe. I love this palette. It's like the most beautiful, gorgeous, grungy rainbow. I almost feel like it's Subculture but updated, and I've created a lot of really fun looks with this. I'm so excited to continue to get to know this palette and create even more looks with it. Also, how freaking cute are these mushrooms? I just love them. Next up, we have another ColourPop palette. This one's an oldie but a goodie. It's the Good Sport palette from ColourPop. I still cannot believe that they A, discontinued this, and B, did not immediately come out with a volume 2 that's bigger and better and brighter. I love this palette so much. I still think that this is the best palette color story wise that ColourPop has ever come out with. It's just so grungy and beautiful. I feel like it was truly ahead of its time. It was kind of like Subculture, and I just love it, you guys. I pulled it back out this fall. I've been using it here and there, and it's a gorgeous little palette. Next up, we have the Menagerie Cosmetics Feral palette. This one is currently in my 25 uses Project Pan. So if you guys are looking for some look inspo for this palette, head over to my Instagram. I've been creating so many looks using this palette along with my Sydney Grace Tiny Marvelous palette. This palette has a really fun color story. I feel like it's a little bit more of a difficult color story. It just doesn't have quite as many neutrals, and I don't feel like there are as many complementary shades as some other palettes that I have in my collection, but this one is really fun, and I've created a lot of really fun color combos with the shadows in here. Next up, we have the Goddess palette from Alter Ego. This is supposed to be a dupe for the Natasha Denona Gold palette. I feel like this has finally gotten the gold palette out of my system. I inexplicably have this pull to the Natasha Denona formula. I do have one Natasha Denona palette in my collection. Now that I say that, I don't know if I pulled that out. I feel like I'm gonna get done filming this video and come back in 20 minutes and find 4 more palettes strewn throughout my house. Oh, you know, I have a couple palettes in the living room. I'll have to go get those. But I really like this color story. It's very neutral. It's got a couple of colorful twists. I adore the shimmery blue gray right here. I'm obsessed with it. Love this matte blue. Overall, I like this palette. I just almost wish I would have bought it sooner because I feel like I'm kind of off the neutral train right now, or at least like the straight neutral train. This is a little bit different because it's got like some mustards and some like greenish shades in there, but like I'm more so into like these tones right here, like blues and greens and purples. But it is a good palette. The formula is fine. It definitely got the Natasha Denona Gold Color Story out of my head. Next up, we have the Zodiac palette from ColourPop. This one was created in collaboration with Kathleen Lights. And I feel like the longer I have this palette, the more I like it. When I first bought it, I was like, oh, I hate this palette. I hate every look that I create with it. But I feel like it was just more of a makeup comfort zone thing. I was like slowly inching my way into getting into color more. And like cool tones and stuff like that, but when I got this palette I wasn't quite there. I still don't think this is my favorite color story, but I really do enjoy dipping into this palette for like maybe 1 or 2 shadows. I hardly ever create a single look from this palette. If you guys could see how many eyeshadow palette towers I have going on right now, I am terrified that something's going to collapse and something's going to come crashing to the floor and explode. Next up, we have the Tiny Marvels palette from Sydney Grace. I've been using this palette so much. I used it a little bit on my eyes today in conjunction with another palette that we'll get to. I love this color story, you guys. I love the color story. I love the formula. It's a freaking fantastic palette. I feel like it was probably, oh, this is a hard one. I feel like this palette and the Raw Beauty Christie palette are probably my favorite collab palettes of 2020, hands down. This color story, I feel like I don't know if I can quite compare them because they're just so different. I think this is a beautifully curated color story. It's rare that I find a palette with such a diverse color story that I feel like I could probably blindly pick 5 shadows and put them on my eyes and they would all look cohesive, and I feel like this color story really nails that. Next up, we have the Arcana palette from Kaleido Cosmetics. You guys, this was in my, I think it was called 25 Uses by Christmas Project Pan at the tail end of last year, and I love this palette so much. I felt like before then, well, I guess I bought this last spring, so I wasn't really feeling these tones in the spring, but in the fall and in the winter, I feel like that's when these tones shine, and now that I'm looking at this, I'm like, maybe I need to pull you back out and play with like these blues, this blue right here. Oh my goodness, I don't know why, but I am deeply obsessed with it. I think it's so gorgeous. Next up, we have the Ace Beauté Flare palette. You guys, this is such a fun palette. I love the color story of this palette. It's a little bit funky, it's a little bit out there, but if you have the patience to work with this formula, it's a little bit different than your average eyeshadow formula. These are some thinner shadows. They've got a little bit of kick up. So it's just different than like an Anastasia shadow or a ColourPop shadow, but the payoff is nice, and if you have the patience to work with them a little bit, you can create some really gorgeous looks. I just love this color story so much. It's so inspiring to me, and I like drooled over this palette for like years before I finally pulled the trigger and grabbed it while it was on sale. But I'm in love with it. I think it's so pretty. Next up, we have the new Nude palette from Huda Beauty. Once again, I grabbed this one on sale because these palettes are far too expensive in my opinion. I really love this palette. I'm always really pleasantly surprised every time I use this palette to create a look. It's a little bit more cool toned, which is a little bit outside my comfort zone, but I love a good berry twist on eyeshadows. I think it really stands out and make my eyes look really blue and pretty. And I just really enjoy this palette. I don't use the glitters because I've just come to realize that I'm not like a straight up glitter gal. Like, I love sparkle, shimmer, gorgeous, but like straight up glitter is just not my jam. It's never been my jam, but otherwise I really do enjoy this color story, and I think it's really pretty. Okay, next up we have the Sigma Corderosa palette. This was one of my favorite palettes of 2020. I think I included it in my top 5 palettes from 2020 video. I can link that down below if you guys want more of like a wrap up of palettes from 2020 instead of my entire eyeshadow collection. But this was a huge hit in 2020 for a lot of people. It's what I have on my eyes today, along with a little bit of the Tiny Marvels palette, and I just think it's so beautiful, you guys. I have so many warm neutrals palettes, as you guys will come to see, but there's something about this palette that I think is just stunning. I love that it's got some pops of pink and purple, or not necessarily purple, like burgundy, but it's also got your classic warm neutral. I feel like it's kind of ABH Modern Renaissance, but like updated, which I think is really cool. Alright, you guys, next up we've got the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette. I lusted after this palette for so long, and then finally my cousin was so sweet. She worked at Ulta and she got it for me, and I love this palette, you guys. I know I don't talk about it a whole lot on my channel because I've kind of been in a warm neutrals break, but this is like the most Thoughtless Warm Smoky Eye palette. If I'm going on a date in the summertime, this is my favorite palette to reach for because I literally just go down the rows, pick a couple mattes, throw them in my crease, gradually build them a little bit deeper and lower into my crease, and I have like a perfect warm smoky eye in like 5 minutes flat. Shadows are super easy to use. The shimmer formula really isn't my favorite. I feel like it just doesn't really compare to my indie formulas, but otherwise really enjoyed this palette. Next up, we have the ColourPop Misunderstood palette. This is another one that I kind of regret purchasing. I've said it like literally 13,000 times. I'm gonna depop this palette. I need to find a magnet in my house that's strong enough to pop these ColourPop shadows out. If you guys have like a certain magnet, like on Amazon or like at Meijer or Target, that you love to pop your shadows, let me know, because I've got a couple of palettes that are magnetic that I could just like pop them out for. This was totally an impulse buy. It's really not my favorite formula. It's not my favorite color story, but I think I would get more use out of it if I had these as singles versus like in a palette. Ooh, next up we have my Whale Song palette from Kaleido Cosmetics. This is my favorite. Oh no. I've got eyeshadow over my lap. Okay. This is my favorite blue-green palette, but it's super fragile, so anytime it gets nudged, the shimmer shadows break, which is deeply irritating. But the shadows in here are so pretty. I think these are really unique tones of blue and green, and so I put up with the fragile shadow mess and I love it. I will say though that this palette almost always stains my lid, so just something to keep in mind if you're thinking about using it. Next up we have the BH Cosmetics Festival Weekend palette, or Weekend Festival palette. I always call this the wrong thing. I love this palette, you guys. I feel like this was kind of my introduction to color. I feel so nostalgic towards this palette because I can distinctly remember when I bought it. I was living in the dorms. It was my freshman year. It was like exam week or like leading up to exam week, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna treat myself. I went to Ulta, I grabbed this, it was on sale, I had a coupon, I was so excited, and I don't know, it just makes me feel really nostalgic and really happy, and I just really love this color story as well. Next up we have the ABH Prism palette. This one is definitely a regret buy for me. I think it was a little bit of FOMO for the reason why I bought this palette. I watched some reviews on it, and I think that's kind of what turned the tide for me. When I initially saw it, I was not into it, and honestly these colors just do not inspire me together. This is definitely one that I need to depot. I just have not like mustered up the moxie to face ripping apart an ABH palette, because I'm 98% sure that you like have to legitimately rip this one apart. So not my favorite, definitely getting depotted. Next up we have the Nomad Cosmetics Tokyo palette. I believe it's called the Harajuku palette, but I'm always hesitant to call it that because I don't want to butcher the name. This palette is so much fun, and it holds such a special place in my heart because it was actually a gift from my wonderful friend Angie. Thank you, Angie. I still really love this palette. I think this is such a fun mix of pastel shades, and these shades right here on the bottom are so glossy, so sparkly, so pretty. I definitely have not really used this one since spring because I just feel like spring is when I want these really beautiful pastel tones, but I cannot wait to dive back into it. Next up we have the Berries and Cream palette from Dominique Cosmetics. I was literally just thinking about this palette the other day. I really had my eye on this palette for years and years. I duped it with shadows that I had in my collection, and I felt like okay about the dupe, but I really just wanted to try the Dominique Cosmetics formula, and I had a chance to purchase it off a friend about a year ago, and I like it. Like, I like the formula. I love this color story. I think it's so like perfect for winter. Whenever I look at it, I think of like ice skating and like going on just like a cute little like winter vacation. It makes me feel so cozy and like reminds me of drinking hot chocolate and going skiing and sledding. And what else do you do on a winter vacation? I don't know. You guys know what I mean. The formula's okay. It's not like knocking my socks off into next year, but I like it. Next up we have the Deuce palette from Juvia's Place. I love this palette, you guys. I've said it many times. This is once again more of a difficult color story, but the shadows themselves I think are so gorgeous. I am obsessed with this like pinky purple shade right here. I love it so much. This green is really pretty. Love this shade, love this shade, and then of course you've got kind of like your staple neutrals in the corners. Oops. I just really like this one. I bought this one off of Kelly Gooch's recommendation, and I really enjoyed it. Alright guys, I'm going to take a little break to dump my memory card and recharge my battery, and also to get some snacks because I was feeling a little snackish. But let's dive back into the palettes. Next up we have my first indie palette, and this is the Blossom palette from Blush Tribe. Blush Tribe no longer exists, I believe. At one point I thought the brand owner was opening a new brand, but I'm not entirely certain. But it's just like a classic rainbow palette, another one that I'm pretty certain I'm going to depot just because I feel like some of these shadows could really fill in some holes in my single shadow collection. If you guys want to know more about my single shadow collection, I decided to exclude it from this video because I just did a single shadow inventory. So I can link that down below if you're interested in learning more about my singles. But here's this palette. It's beautiful. I feel like it's been quite a while since I've used this formula. I was going to say I feel like this formula is not quite up to snuff with what I'm kind of used to as being the standard of eyeshadow in my collection at this point, but it's been quite a while since I've used it, so maybe I shouldn't quite make that statement yet. Next up we have the Lorac Pro palette. This was a gift many moons ago, and this is one that I desperately need to depot. I just don't reach for neutrals like I used to. Once upon a time this would have been a perfect palette for me, perfect for every day, and I used the crap out of it at one point, but where I'm at with my makeup collection right now, my makeup style, this just isn't quite suited anymore, so I really think if I depotted it, these shadows would get a lot more use from me. I also feel guilty using this as like a whole palette because Lorac is not cruelty free, and I acquired this when I wasn't fully cruelty free, so I feel like by maybe depotting it, maybe I'll kind of like forget that these aren't cruelty free and feel better about using them. Next up we have the So Jaded palette from ColourPop. This is one that I lusted over for such a very long time, and then I finally got it for Christmas last year, and it's a really gorgeous palette, but I have to say I find it to be a little bit overwhelming. I want to do a video really soon about kind of rearranging my ColourPop palettes because there are a couple ColourPop palettes I have in my collection that I like them, but they just aren't clicking with me for some reason, so I'm thinking maybe if I rearrange them I would get some more usage out of them. This is one where I've seen so many gorgeous rearrangements that I think I would have so much fun rearranging it and so much more fun with the color story if I switched it around. I probably will end up labeling the shadows because, I don't know, it just makes me sad to not know which shadow is which, even though it's not like I'm a tutorial based channel, so that doesn't really matter to me. But it's kind of like my OCD kicking in. But here's this palette. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's humongous. Oh, and now we have the two Morphe palettes in my collection. So this is I believe this is the Boss Mood palette, the 35M palette. This was the last Morphe palette that I purchased. I was enamored by the color story, and I'd been seeing a lot of really good reviews on it. I had just kind of come off the high of previously purchasing the Jaclyn Hill palette, and I think as we all know at this point, that palette has a drastically different formula than many of other Morphe shadows. These ones just really don't do it for me formula-wise, but I just love the color story so much. I have a hard time letting go of this palette. I really need to spend some more time with this palette and decide if it's something that I want to keep in my collection because it is quite large, and I feel like it could probably go to a better home and get some more use there. Next up we have the infamous Jaclyn Hill palette. You guys, this palette holds such a special place in my heart. I just remember being, oops, I stuck my finger in a shadow. I just remember being so over the moon excited about this palette, and when I got it, I think this was like the only palette I used for like 4 months. I loved it that much, but it's not my jam anymore. I don't love the neutrals quite as much as I used to. I feel like the colorful shades in here are really lacking, so again, this is one that I'm kind of contemplating depotting. I would like to depot it, but at the same time I have such strong sentimental feelings attached to it. I kind of want to keep it as a whole. But I feel like that's also silly because it's makeup and it's meant to be used. So I'm kind of at a crossroads with this palette. Next up we have the Emily Edit palette. This is another one that I kind of keep for sentimental reasons. I don't love the Makeup Revolution formula. I was more pleased with it when I had this palette. I think I tried one more palette and then I just decided, no, we're done with it. But I really love this color story, and one of my favorite YouTubers, Emily Noel 83, created this palette, and I loved her. I loved supporting her, and I love this color story. I just don't think the shadow formula is quite where it needs to be. So this is another just kind of like memory keepsake palette. Woo, woo, it's happening. It's happening. Towers of eyeshadow palettes are falling. Alright, I guess we're gonna deal with these ones next. First up we have the Milani Cosmetics Pure Passions palette. You guys remember when these were like all the rage on YouTube? I really lusted over this palette for such a long time. I was like, I love warm neutrals. This is a super affordable warm neutral palette. I didn't have that many affordable palettes in my collection, and so when I saw this palette and I saw so many people raving about it, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna pull the trigger. And honestly, you guys, I don't think these are that great. I don't know why people keep raving about them. There is a chance that the formula in my shadows has gone bad because I have had this for a couple of years, but the shimmers crease so terribly on me. The mattes really fade on me throughout the day. Like on the onset, these are beautiful shadows, but they just don't hold up throughout the day. So this is one that I need to declutter. I just haven't quite done it yet. Next up we have the Nomad Cosmetics Malibu Surf Shack palette. This is the cutest little quad. Oh my goodness. I feel like this is like the perfect vacation quad. Like you literally just throw like this shade in your crease, this all over your lid. You could pop this like on your lower lash line for a little pop of color and you would be out the door. I was really drawn into the marketing on this palette. I'm not gonna lie, you guys. The shadows in here are pretty, but once I got it home, I kind of realized that they really aren't anything crazy unique compared to what I already have. And I think it's a cute palette. It's one that I enjoy using, but it's not like gonna be in one of my top favorite palettes of ever, you know? Kind of same thing with the Kaleido Cosmetics and Tanita's Surf Shack palette. This one is a little bit more colorful, which really makes me excited. Honestly, I feel like you could bring both of these along on a vacation and it would be super fun. I really need to pair those two together. I think that would be fun. But it's just, they're all matte and I like the quality shadows, I like the colors, I like their performance, but it's just not like quite where I'm at with my makeup collection, my makeup usage. You know? Okay, guys, next up we have some more ColourPop palettes. I was an avid ColourPop supporter for a couple of years. I've since kind of taken a step back from them just because I haven't really been impressed, A, with the collections that they've been coming out with, or B, the inclusivity of those collections. I'm really hoping with the new collection and the ColourPop Make Me Black, ColourPop Me Black, I feel like I'm saying that hashtag wrong. I think it's ColourPop Me Black. Collection that they came out with recently. I'm really hoping that's going to turn around because they do have some good products and good formulas. But I have the Strawberry Shake palette from them. This is such a cute palette, you guys. Oh my goodness. I feel like I don't remember that many people talking about this palette when it came out, but I think it is so stinking cute. Like, it is the perfect Valentine's Day palette. If you guys already have this in your stash, pull it out, use it for Valentine's Day. I know I will be. It's just so soft and pretty, and I just love it. These shadows are really easy to use. The color story is gorgeous. I don't know what else to say. Oh, this is one of my like shameful palette buys. Not really shameful, but it was just like an absolute impulse buy. And I look back and I'm like, was that really a smart choice? And it was definitely not. But I do actually have both of the Frozen palettes. First we'll talk about the Anna palette. I was obsessed with Frozen 2 when it came out. Let's be honest, I'm still a little bit obsessed. I think it's so cute. I love the songs, I love the music, I love the the message behind the movie. I just think it's absolutely adorable. My boyfriend and I went to go see it 3 times when it was in theaters. I mean, granted, it was when it was $5 Tuesdays, so we didn't like spend $500 going to the movies that many times to see it, but still. This is the Anna palette. It's really cozy. It's got like cozy vibes. It reminds me of like being curled up around a fire with like a cup of hot chocolate in your hand. This is a really fun palette in the fall. I don't really love the formula of these eyeshadows, but like it's the Anna palette. I have a really hard time letting it go. I feel like the Elsa palette is actually a little bit more unique to my collection, mostly because it's more like cool toned, and I'm not really a cool toned gal. I mean, look at my eyes today. There's nothing cool toned about them today. But I felt like it was a little bit more unique in that sense, and I was so attracted to the Periwinkle shade right here. I have a weakness for Periwinkle eyeshadows. If they're in a palette, I'm just like, oh, you're like 10 times more attractive than you were without the Periwinkle. So it's kind of what drew me into this palette, along with the cute branding and Frozen 2 marketing. Next up, we have the She palette from ColourPop, or is it the Femme Rosa palette? I can never tell. It's this beautiful, super like soft romantic palette. You guys, I feel like this palette was not talked about at all when it came out, and this was like even before ColourPop started releasing things at such a ridiculous rate. I just think this is such a pretty little palette. It's not the most diverse palette out there. It's not going to give you like 500 different looks, but it's a really simple palette to use. You have all of your key mattes right here. You can throw either of these 2 lighter ones in the crease, use one of these to deepen it up, throw one of the shimmers on the lid, and you're good. Run out the door. I love how I keep saying like quick easy looks to run out the door when none of us are actually leaving our house. I just like cannot remove that from my vocabulary. Anyways, next up we have the Modern Renaissance palette from ABH. Mine is well loved, although I don't have any pans in it. I would really love to hit pan on some of my ABH eyeshadows this year. I've heard that they're the easiest to pan, and like lately, weirdly enough, I've gotten the urge to start like actually hitting pan on my shadows. I hate the actual process of panning eyeshadows. I just have this weird thing where I don't like to like repetitively use shadows or palettes too much. It just like kills my creativity. I've kind of switched my project panning style to do a 25 usage rolling project pan style, so I can link my most recent update down below if you guys are interested in kind of learning a little bit more about that. But I'd really love to roll this palette in to kind of get some more usage on it and hopefully some pans. Okay, next up we have the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette. This one again was a bit of an impulse buy, and one that I slightly regret buying just because I feel like now looking at it I see that it's very limiting in the way that I do my makeup. I can certainly step out of my comfort zone and do a different kind of makeup style with this palette, but for me, I really like to follow kind of a similar formula every time I create a look. At least if I'm creating like this standard shape right here, I'll throw a mid-tone in the crease, something deeper in the outer corner, and something mid-tone or light and shimmery on the lid. And there's really only 2 deepening shades in this palette, and even at that, they're not super deep. So there's a lot of just like really light shades, mid-tone shades, some shimmery shades. The shimmers that are in here are absolutely stunning, gorgeous, no complaints there, but there's just not a ton of variation within this palette. Alright you guys, next up we got some Juvia's Place palettes. I just tried to wink there, that was weird, let's pretend that didn't happen. First up we have the Mini Masquerade palette. This is my first Juvia's Place palette, and one that I've kind of said that I regret purchasing in the past. It's really, really pretty. I love that there's a nice combo of neutrals and colorful shadows, but it's not super cohesive for my skin tone the way I like to do my eyeshadow. Juvia's Place is a woman of color owned brand, and I believe their palettes are created with women of color in mind. So a lot of these shadows are just a little bit deeper than like what I need to create a full eye look, so I can never really create like a full eye look from this palette, which I think sometimes deters me from using it. I really need to make a point. This is another one that I could probably throw into my project pan to get some more use out of it and to get to know this palette a little bit more, because these shadows are beautiful and they perform really nicely. Next up we have the Mini Magic palette. Similar story with this palette. This one I feel like the color story just throws me off a little bit. So you've got kind of your warm tones up top and you've got your cooler tones down here. I feel like this palette is missing some mattes to be like truly fantastic for me. Like I really wish one of these cool tone shimmers was like a mid-tone cool shimmer, and like, or not mid-toned cool matte is what I meant to say, and like one of these could have been a deeper warm tone matte, because I feel like I go to create a look with this and I'm like starting off with the warm tones, so like I throw a red in the crease and I put this on the lid, and then I'm like, what do I put on my outer corner that's not blue or green? So I just feel like when I look at this color story, it's a bit disjointed in my head, but certainly I compare it with another palette that maybe has a lot of deeper mattes and maybe get some more use out of it. Next up we have the Honey palette from ColourPop. How cute is that name? I may not totally approve of ColourPop's business practices and how inclusive their palettes are, but you gotta admit their marketing and branding is like out of this world every single time. This is a straight up yellow palette, and I like this palette. I went through like a yellow phase last spring where I was using this a whole lot, but to be totally honest with you guys, I haven't used it a ton since then. But honestly, I'm really enjoying filming this video because I get to dig back through my palettes and get really inspired by what I already have in my collection, and it's definitely working. And I feel like I'm going to use a new palette every single day for the next 3 months because there's just so many that I need to jump into and dive back into. I also have the Orange Roulette palette from ColourPop. This is, again, a beautiful palette. This is one of my favorites to reach for in the summertime to create something that's just like really, really warm, intensely orangey. It really sets my blue eyes off, and I always feel like, honestly, like $1 million when I use this palette because it just really shows off my eyes so nicely. Don't love the glitter in here, but otherwise I really like these shadows. Next up we've got the Smashbox X Vlada palette. This is such a beautiful little palette, and it's totally underused and underrated in my collection. It's a gorgeous everyday palette. You've got literally all these staple neutral shades that I need for a simple, quick, out-the-door eye look. Beautiful mid-tone matte, something to deepen it up in the outer corner, 2 inner corner shadows, and 4 different lid shades. Like, I don't know how you can get more mindless than this, and I really need to use this more. Ooh, next up we have the Brown Sugar palette from ColourPop. I first tested this palette at my cousin's house. She had this palette and I was like, oh my gosh, like what is with this formula? This feels so rich and intense and so like a step up for ColourPop quality. Not that they were bad before, but this is just better. I feel like this is when I really started to notice a shift in the ColourPop formula for it to be even better. Now I know a lot of people have said recently that the quality is very much hit and miss with ColourPop, and while I do have quite a few ColourPop palettes in my collection, I don't think I'd call myself a palette collector because they launch palettes so frequently. So my overall experience with ColourPop's formula has been really positive, but some people have said there's been like inconsistencies. But I love this palette, you guys. It's a bit of a like smokier everyday neutral palette for me, but everything blends super beautifully. Everything is gorgeously pigmented and I really love it. Next up we have the e.l.f. Mad for Matte 2 palette. This is such an oldie but goodie for me. I have so much sentimental I have so much sentimentality wrapped up in this palette. I distinctly remember purchasing this palette. I was like buying stuff for my dorm room my freshman year, and I saw this palette and I was like, I've never seen that in stores before, so I grabbed it and threw it in my cart, and I was just so excited to have it. I really enjoy this formula. It's not like crazy pigmented or anything out of this world, but it's really easy to work with, and if you have a beginner makeup lover in your life, or if you just like no fuss matte eyeshadows, I would definitely give this one a try. Next up, we have the Ace Beauty Grandiose palette. I got this one in a boxy charm. It's just like a classic warm neutral palette with some pops of berry. Really gorgeous. Nothing really like out of the ordinary in my collection, but one that I enjoyed nonetheless. Oh, next up we have the Persona Cosmetics Color Theory Pink palette. I was so excited to have this palette because this was the first PR that I've ever received. They sent me the little color theory kit and I was just like screaming internally. I really enjoy this little 5-some. I was gonna say quad, but this is not a quad. These shadows are really beautifully pigmented, super easy to work with. I think this shade curation provides a lot of versatility, and it's definitely something that I love to use. Next up, we have the ColourPop Whatever palette. This was a gift and one that I love so much. It's like, this is me in a palette. Like this, I could have created this eye look with this palette. It's just like warm, cozy neutrals with a little bit of depth, a little bit of bling. And it's just beautiful. I can't say anything else other than that. I really like this one. Oh, next up we have the Dream Street palette from ColourPop. You guys, I can't believe they finally got rid of this, A. And B, this one once again just really holds a sentimental place in my heart. This was the first product. Was this the first product? I was gonna say, I think this is the first product I reviewed on my channel, but maybe that's not true. But anyways, I used it on my channel a whole lot. This is one of my favorite palettes. I distinctly remember having this one in my collection at a time when I didn't have that many palettes and I didn't have that much color to work with, and so I would dip into these shades so frequently. Love this palette. This palette, you guys, is my summer palette, like every single year. This is the Sweet Talk palette from ColourPop. Like if you were looking for a summery, springy palette, look no further. This is perfect. It has your beautiful peaches. You guys can't even see them because it's so reflected. It's got like the peaches, the beautiful bronzes, your staple neutrals, some glitter if you want to get a little crazy. I don't love the glitter, but some people do. Love this palette. Oh, another palette regret. This is the Makeup Revolution Velvet Rose palette. This is supposed to be a dupe for the Anastasia Beverly Hills. What's that palette called now? Is it called the Glam palette? Not the Glam palette. You guys know what I'm talking about? I don't know why I'm blanking on the name right now. Don't love the formula. The color story is pretty, but I kind of regret purchasing this one overall. Oh, next up we have the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette. I bought this one years and years ago and it still smells absolutely delicious, which probably should be a little bit concerning. This is a cute little palette. It's not one that I really reach for a whole lot anymore, but it's very sentimental to me. Next up we have the Enduring Love palette from Sydney Grace. This is one that I purchased from them over their sale last summer. This is, oh good, I just thought I dug my finger in that shadow. This is a very cool toned palette, which is very out of my comfort zone for me. I'd be lying if I said I've used it a whole lot since I purchased it, but I'm really excited to get to know it this year. Next up we have the Impressionism palette from Muse Beauty. This was sent to me by the brand. This is a really fun palette, you guys. I played with this for a couple weeks. I did a couple looks on my Instagram and I really enjoyed it. I think the formula is fine. It didn't really knock my socks off, but I did enjoy the color story and I had fun playing with it. Next up we have the Through My Eyes palette from ColourPop. This is such a pretty palette, you guys. Again, this is one that I drooled over and went back and forth on for so long. I finally just waited for a sale and then I bought it. I just think this color story is so much fun. The shadow formulas are a little bit hit and miss on this one, but nothing that's completely unworkable. Just takes a little bit of patience and some finagling. And again, just one that I really love. Next up we have the Persona Identity 2 palette. This is a gorgeous, like, everyday neutral palette. It's really easy to use. The Persona formula is gorgeous. Again, another one that I really enjoy using. I'm trying to fly through these last ones because I think this video is already up to like 40 minutes long, if not longer, so I'm trying to go through these last ones really quick. Next up we have ColourPop Give It To Me Straight. This is a gorgeous neutral palette, you guys. This was my go-to everyday palette for such a long time. Oh, did I hit pan? I'm very close to hitting pan on this shadow. This is one of my favorite shadows for every day. Slap it over my crease, slap it over the lid, run out the door, you call it a day. Next up we have the Kaleido Cosmetics Golden Hour palette. This is a pretty palette. The brand sent it to me. I don't think I would have picked it out for myself otherwise. It's another one that I think I'm going to end up depotting because since this is an all shimmer palette, I just really don't find myself reaching for it. If these were like multi-chromes or like super sparkly shades, I think that may make a difference, but they're just like straight up metallics. Next up, we have the Tribe palette from Juvia's Place. This is such a gorgeous green palette, you guys. This is probably my favorite Juvia's Place palette. I just really love all the greens in here, and I think there are a lot of really unique shades in here otherwise. Like this right here is like almost a like champagne lime tinged shade. So pretty. This bronze has like a green tinge to it. So does this brown right here. They're just really, really gorgeous shadows. Next up, we have the Lime Crime Prelude palette. This was a brutal impulse buy. I just really want to try Lime Crime's formula, and I was really, really attracted to this color story when I saw it. Now that I have it in my hands, I don't really think it was a great purchase because I feel like this palette's color story just doesn't really suit my like eyeshadow preferences. There's like no midtones in here. There's just like this translucent shade, and then you have a super deep navy and a gorgeous deep purple, and the metallics are really pretty. I just like am really missing that midtone shadow. Next up, we have the Alma palette. Amy Loves Makeup created this in collaboration with a brand that I'm not really sure even exists anymore. This collaboration was a bit of a hot mess, but I still bought the palette. I was super excited to support Amy, and I think the color story is pretty. But I would not recommend ever purchasing from this brand ever again. Ooh, next up we have the Royal Affair palette from BH Cosmetics. This is one of my favorite palettes, you guys. I feel like no one talks about this palette, and they really should be. This was in my 25 uses by Christmas project pan, so I did so many looks using this palette, and I enjoyed it so much. I think the formula was really easy to use, really beautiful to work with, and I just think the color story is gorgeous. I feel like it's not talked about enough. I don't think it's actually even available anymore, but I really love it. Next up, we have the Jackie Aina palette from ABH. Again, another absolutely gorgeous palette that I'm excited to get to know more this year. I did use it a little bit last year, but I was doing so much stress shopping during quarantine that I really did not give my eyeshadow collection the love it deserves. Next up, we have the Menage Pastel Pup palette. This is a gorgeous little pastel palette, you guys. Definitely one of my favorites, in my collection to use. It's really, really fun. I do have several videos on my channel with this palette if you guys want to see it in action or hear like more of my in-depth thoughts on it. Next up, we have the e.l.f. To the Rescue palette. This was created in collaboration with Jay Kissa. This is one that I feel like I just need to spend some more time with. I've said it before that I haven't really enjoyed this palette, but I've also just kind of been trying to use it on its own. I haven't really tried using it in conjunction with other palettes. So I'm going to start there, see how I feel about it then, and then if I don't love it, I may end up decluttering this one. Next up, we have the Bad Habit Cult Mania palette. This palette, oh my goodness, I feel like this palette was such a hassle to get a hold of, and another one that I'm really heavily considering depotting. I really honestly just love like these shades right here. They're like chunky and a little bit glittery, and there's just something really fun and foiled about them. The rest of them I can kind of take or leave, but this palette was just a hassle and a half to get, so I feel like every time I look at it I'm just like, ugh, you were such a pain. Next up, we have the ABH Subculture palette. Everyone and their brother owns this palette. It's such a good one, you guys. Oh, there's a brush in there. I'll take that brush out. I've been taking my dual ended brushes out of palettes because A, I never use them if they're just stuck in a palette, and B, they fall out all the time. But I think this color story is just so beautiful. It's grungy, it's gorgeous. The formula is difficult to use, but I can look past that because I really do enjoy these colors. Alright guys, we are down to our last 4 palettes. I promise this video is almost over. So next up we have the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette. This is one that I've had such a love affair with this year. I used it so much in the summertime and like early fall. I think it's absolutely perfect for that time of year. These tones are rich and vibrant and have such a beautiful warmth to them. Don't think the Natasha Denona formula is worth the money, but I do enjoy this palette. Next up, we have the e.l.f. Retro Paradise palette. I really love this palette, you guys. It was definitely an impulse buy, and I don't think this is my favorite shadow formula, but the color story is really fun and the shadows are really easy to work with. Oh wait, maybe we have 5 palettes. I can't remember if I already mentioned this palette. This is the Le Rock Cosmetics Shine Bright Pro palette. This was a holiday launch of theirs a couple of years ago before I went cruelty free, and I really love these shadows. Again, I kind of have that guilt associated with this brand because they're not cruelty free, so I feel guilty for using it, but I'm going to depot it and hopefully that'll give me some more like freedom mentally to use this a little bit more. Next we have the Artemis palette from Alter Ego. I was chomping at the bit to get this palette because this is supposed to be a dupe of the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette that I drooled over for such a long time. But I think I could finally say, safely, now that I have this palette, I do not need the Metropolis palette. I do enjoy this color story, but it's not as inspiring to me as I thought it would be, and nor do I use it as much as I thought I would. And the final palette is the Kaleido Cosmetics Killer Purr palette. This is a beautiful grungy neutral palette with a couple pops of like green and orange and blue. I really like the mattes in this palette, but the shimmers are just kind of terrible. I haven't swatched anything else in this video, which has taken some serious self-control. Like they look metallic on my finger, but on the eyes they just aren't up to par with A, Menage's other shimmers, or B, most of the other shimmers in my collection. So that concludes my palette collection, you guys. I know this is going to be the longest video that I've ever uploaded to YouTube, so I can only imagine how long it's going to take to edit it and then export it, but I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was worth it. Thank you so much for watching. I know I have a ridiculous amount of eyeshadow. I don't need you to tell me in the comments, so please be kind, but that's it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave me a comment down below letting me know if you guys also have a large eyeshadow collection, you have a really small curated collection. I don't know if I'll ever be that person that has like an itty bitty small curated eyeshadow collection because it's just what brings me joy in makeup, but I would love to hear from you guys. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!